Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mindful Moments podcast. I'm Tracy, your host and fellow traveler on this journey of self-exploration and discovery. So today, I want to talk about our limits. And even further than that, I want to talk a little bit more about kind of how we go about communicating those limits. And before I get started, I wanted to share a little bit about a conversation I was having with my husband, Calder. And we were just talking the other day about a massive storm that we had a while back. And I mean, now that I think about it, this was probably like months back. But we were talking about how we love a good heavy rain because typically it means that it's really good for his business. And he owns a foundation repair company here in St. Louis, and it's called Jet Foundation Repair. So, hey, if you ever find that you're in the need for some sort of foundation repair services, or you're noticing that you have a wet basement, holla at us, for show. And I will say also, if you give him a call, please let him know that I'm the one who sent you. But anyway, so I often find myself just kind of listening in on some of his phone calls whenever he's kind of talking it over with his customers, maybe talking with his colleagues and whatnot. And the other day I decided to ask him, I'm like, okay, so at what point, does someone finally decide to pick up the phone and call you for help? Like, at what point does Jet Foundation Repair get that phone call? At what point is the customer deciding that it's time to do something about this issue? And he told me that it depends. So basically he said that sometimes there are customers, they call immediately at the first sign of there being an issue, but oftentimes he said that people will call when it's, the most urgent of times. And he said that in some circumstances, it's kind of wild because people will kind of adapt to their conditions. And so sometimes they find themselves getting to a point where they just expect water in their basement. And they notice pretty much every time that it rains, they know that this is something that's going to happen. They're going to have water and excess moisture in their basements, and they typically will end up kind of normalizing it. And I don't know this from, obviously, I've not had this particular issue, knocking on wood, but also, hey, I happen to know a guy. But still, I imagine that what goes through the minds of the customers is that they think that having a basement that's flooding is just part of owning a home, or maybe they just think that this is something that happens, for their particular house, for their property. And so, as it goes, instead of fixing the problem immediately as they notice the problem, they do what us homeowners tend to do, and we try to remediate the issue on our own, So sometimes that means, putting down blankets to try to soak it all up, or maybe trying to mop every other day. And then, of course, sometimes you get those super ambitious ones and they end up purchasing a bunch of dehumidifiers. They're plugging those bad boys in, trying to do their best to suck up some of that moisture. And they find themselves just trying to manage the symptoms the best that they can because they think that this is just how it goes. They think that they just have some sort of house that collects rainwater, that just tends to flood very easily. So I was talking with Calder about this the other day, right? And he said that whenever someone reaches out, they go through a few different, we'll kind of call them discovery phases. Okay, so Sometimes a person thinks that they have a very tiny surface level issue, so maybe they reach out because they see a little crack in the drywall, and sometimes they're assuming, hoping probably, that it's going to be a very quick fix, that he'll be in and out. And he gets there, and then he gets into these little crawl spaces to inspect everything, and he finds that the load-bearing wall is leaning 4 inches inward. Now, if you don't know what a load-bearing wall is, it's exactly what it sounds like, okay? It's that main structural wall, and it holds up the heavy weight of the entire house. So if you can imagine, okay, if that wall gives out, essentially the structure comes down. The structure is no longer being supported the way that it needs to be, right? And so in this case, with this particular customer, this core wall is failing, and the customer, before they called Calder, they had absolutely no idea that this was the extent of the damages. You know what I mean? Because all they saw was that little crack. And what I've noticed is that people do this exact same thing, myself included. I'm certainly not excluding myself from this equation here. But we do this with our own personal limits. So sometimes we find ourselves normalizing a flooding basement, or we find ourselves wanting to hide a leaning wall from the people around us. And so, of course, ever since I had this conversation with Calder, I've been thinking about this. And, hey, it's just the way that my mind works. But I think about the person who acts like that load-bearing wall in our lives. Now, mind you, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be transparent with this. Y'all already know I'm the youngest of 6. So from a family aspect, this here doesn't really apply to me in terms of I'm very fortunate because my older siblings and my parents, they do such an incredible job of sharing the load, sharing that work. But, I can't say that my eldest siblings feel the same way. At some point, it occurs to many of us that we have a ton of responsibility, that we are bearing a very, very heavy load. All right. And it could be that this is going on with perhaps a work project. Maybe you have a team of colleagues, but yet here you are again the day before the presentation, and you are the one who's sitting there finalizing all the slides. Okay, you're the one who's setting up all the audio, visual, and you're untangling all these cable cords while everyone else is sitting and socializing. Yeah, I've been there. Okay, I've been there. And in those instances, you become that main wall that's holding everything up, and you just kind of absorb that weight. And in my experience, from what I myself have experienced as well as what I've observed, is that this tends to be a really huge issue for those of us who are more highly independent, self-motivated people. For those of us who pride ourselves on handling things on our own, having that can-do attitude. And it's almost like you don't even realize it. You don't really realize how much better it would be, just how ideal it would be if you could just have a little bit of help, right? So what we tend to do is we just go on and we assume that this is exactly the way that things are supposed to be, all right? That, because you are the eldest sibling, this is what you're supposed to be doing, because you are the only child, that you are supposed to be handling all of the logistics for your parents on your own, because you are the team leader, perhaps of maybe your work group or whatever. You think that this is how you're supposed to function because of, I don't even know how to say this. I can't say why. Lots of it, of course, because of societal expectations. And so, what I've come to notice is that when you find that you have all of this on your plate, okay, you get that moment, you kind of check in, you look around at your surroundings, and in that process, you're wondering why nobody is there to help you. You're wondering where the folks are at, where's your support, where's the rest of your team, where are your other siblings? And on some level, it's like, what do we think is going to happen there? On some level, it's like, hmm, you know, I, what did we really think was going to happen? And in my mind, it almost makes this assumption where it's like operating under this premise of thinking that people are somehow telepathic. And I'm going to tell you this. I looked this up the other day, and there is a clinical term for this, and it's called the illusion of transparency. And it's where we think that this stress that we have going on internally is somehow obvious to everyone else. As far as I'm concerned, in my eyes, I've kind of been rebranding it, and I'm now, I need to get this term trademarked or whatever, because for me it's like a telepathy fallacy. That's how I see it. And I've had to confront this for myself, because I found myself so deep in the pits of exhaustion where I legitimately was like, okay, I think I'm communicating this to other people. I think I'm looking exhausted. I'm acting exhausted. Sometimes you think that if you sigh heavily enough or walk around looking tired enough, have enough of an attitude, maybe, that it's sending a clear message to everybody else. That everybody else will now know that you're overwhelmed. And it's almost like we're thinking that these gestures, the way that we are emoting is communicating to others what we are going through. And so you sit there and you wait, you're looking around and looking to those people around you and really hoping that they will somehow magically realize that you have an entire whole crisis going on. And in those times, surprise, surprise, but nobody steps in. Nobody comes to help. There is absolutely zero support that comes to your rescue in those moments. And the reality of that, and that's why I've been calling it the telepathy fallacy, is because, they cannot read your mind. If we go back to that example about the colleagues, while you're trying to do your presentation and you're setting everything up, your other colleagues, all they see is that the presentation's getting done. So they walk right on in, they get to socialize and hanging out. Essentially, they put their feet up and they chill because they know that you've got it. And the whole time you're sitting there plugging it. Like I said, I can just picture myself because I have been in this situation before. And I'm like trying to hurry up and unwrap all the cords. I'm trying to plug in my flash drive. The thing is not plugging in. There's all this different audio visual issues going on. And in the meantime, you find yourself getting resentful, because as you're sitting there doing all that, you're wondering how these other people who are your colleagues who are on this team with you, how they can just sit there and watch you do it all. Metaphorically speaking, they're watching you hold that whole house up. And while all that's going on, instead of you verbalizing what it is that you're needing and how much of a struggle that you're going through, instead in those moments, I know that I've just kind of, I grin and bear it. I just keep trucking along. I don't want to make waves. You know what I mean? And what I will say is normally, I really wouldn't have that much beef with handling things this way, but what I have learned and what I have experienced, what I have observed is that there will be something big that happens. I mean, something massive, something bigger than big. I'm talking the stuff that completely just shakes the ground beneath you. Okay. And it could be a family crisis. It could be that you're experiencing a major health issue. Could be the loss of a loved one. And so you find yourself feeling completely overwhelmed because you not only have your regular stuff that you're dealing with, you not only have your regular, work stuff and the family, the kids, the friends, the obligations, yada, yada. You not only have all that stuff, but now you have this other big crisis. And so in those moments, of course, you're feeling overwhelmed. You're more than done. You're beyond, right? And so in those moments, your mind just kind of shuts down for a second. And what I've noticed in these moments, is that people who love you, people who care for you, people who are interested in seeing you do well, those people will come to you and they'll ask you. They'll ask you straight up, how can I help you? Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Is there any way I can be of support? Is there anything I can do? Just call me anytime. I'm always available, whatever, right? Those are the people, they say those types of things. And in those moments, you, of course, tell them that you're fine, you've got it, or you thank them for offering and you let them know, just keep us in your thoughts. And that's pretty much the extent of it. You don't think anyone can help anyway. If we're gonna keep it a buck about this, there's nothing, let me say it. Okay. When someone comes to you in these moments and they're trying to ask you how they can help, where do you even start is the question. Because you already know that nobody can fix the main problem. If there's a true crisis that's going on, it doesn't matter how great a person's intentions are whenever they come to you and ask you if they can help or what they can do for you. You are not going to immediately have something that you're not going to have a response for them right away, because all you can think about is the main problem, the big issue, the crisis, how much it is affecting you and impacting your life and the lives of others if more people are affected or impacted by it. And on top of that, you already know that your friends have their own stuff going on. You know that your family has their own stuff going on. So when those people come to you and they offer to help you with what you have going on, if you're anything like me, you tell them that you've got it because you don't want to be a burden to them. You don't want to put your hardships, you don't want to place your hardships on other people that you care for. Especially other people, like I said, who are going through their own stuff. So you just keep it to yourself and you keep dealing with all of it by yourself. And so, like I've already told y'all, I've said this previously in other podcast episodes that I've done. This podcast is number one for me. Okay, so it's me calling me out, but also I'm sharing it because I recognize that I'm not the only one. So if you are anything like me and you really, really do not like asking for help, I mean, listen, if you know, you know. But if you find, and maybe you don't even mind asking for help, but maybe it just kind of catches you off guard whenever people ask you what they can do. Whenever people are sitting there, you're looking them dead in the face, they're looking you dead in the face, and they're asking you like, oh yeah, well, what can I do for you? Just let me know if I can do anything. And honestly, in my mind, I kinda look at this and I'm like, I really don't wanna lose that credit. Like, it's almost like a credit, like a token almost, and it's like, ugh, because you very rarely will get people who genuinely are coming to you asking how they can be of assistance to you, how they can support your leaning wall. You don't usually get people who are coming to you genuinely wanting to offer this help. And so when a situation comes and people are offering it and also you need it, I've learned that those are the times that I pretty much always am drawing a blank. It's like, oh crap, I know I have a whole list of stuff. I know I have a need-to-do list. I know that there's so many things, but where do I even start on delegating? Like, what can I even delegate? You know what I'm saying? And so for people like me, people like you, what I did, I went ahead and put together a few practical strategies. Y'all already know how this goes. Let's get on into it. Okay, so for the first strategy, okay, the first one is about handing off the small stuff. All right. As we've already determined, we're on the same page on this, that your friends cannot fix the main crisis. Your family cannot fix whatever problem is going on. So you don't ask them to, straight up. Instead, what I recommend is ask them to handle the normal, everyday, logistical stuff that you have going on in your life. Okay, so for me, I have two dogs. Y'all already know my Buckles and my Daxie. I have two dogs. So what I would maybe ask for is, can y'all pick up some dog food? Maybe if you have a vehicle, ask them to drop your car off at the shop, or even have them grab some groceries for you. The goal here is that you want to hand off a simple errand, a simple task, something that, I mean, not to be, I was going to say something that a monkey could do, but, something that the easiest of easy tasks, that's what you want to hand off, something that just immediately takes something off of your list, off of your plate. And it helps you realize that this is pretty much the exact type of help that you need, the type of help that you can ask for whenever the main problem is impossible to fix. And there will be those problems, where, like I said, no matter how great the intentions are of the other people and their intentions to help and want to help, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes there is nothing that they can do to fix what is the primary issue, the primary problem. And that's why I love this. That's why I love handing off the small stuff. And then the second strategy is kind of piggybacking off of the first strategy, but it changes the game. All right. And it's about having that answer ready to go. All right. So y'all already know, but I'm going to say it anyway, because the thing is, when you're stressed out, when you're in the thick of it, and someone asks you how they can help, your automatic reflex is going to be to say, "No, I'm good. I got it. Thanks." You know, that's the truth. Because for most of us, we just straight up do not have the energy to come up with a job for them, to come up with a task, to come up with some sort of ask right there, then in the moment. And what I've learned is that if you can have those answers figured out and have them on the ready before someone comes to ask you, if you know that you're sitting there, perhaps that this issue has come up, you're in a very challenging period of your life, and other people who love you know about it, like I said, then I would immediately go to grab a notebook, All right. Look at your week. Go look at your calendar. Look at your week. See what you have going on for the week. And you find one specific thing. All right. I would even say have a whole list if can. If you've got, especially if you have a large support system, if you have lots of people who love you and care for you, I would say go on ahead and draw that list on out. Make that bad boy nice and lengthy. Okay. Make sure that you get all them characters. Okay. Page after page, number that list. Put columns, organize it, highlight the list, do whatever it is that you've got to do to make sure that you have that list ready and keep that in your back pocket. All right. That way, the second someone makes the offer, because they will, again, like I said, this is going to happen. Someone is going to offer. They're going to come to you. Oh, Tracy, how can I help you? How can I be of support? What is it that I can do for you? And all I'm going to have to do is pull that list out of my back pocket. All right. I don't have to think on my feet. I don't have to be quick with an answer, yada, yada, none of that. All right. In those moments, I can just hand someone a task. I can, of course, obviously thank them for their offer. Here you go. All right. These dogs need to be walked. You feel me? So I love that one. And then the third strategy, it's all about giving those people a guilt-free pass. All right. So this is for those moments when perhaps you haven't been propositioned. Nobody's been soliciting you for. Nobody's been coming to you saying, oh, how can I help? You know what I mean? So these are for those instances when you truly have been just kind of managing on your own. You haven't made a whole lot of, no waves have been made about the desperate straits that you're in, right? Like nobody knows what's going on. You've kind of been suffering in silence and you'd like to keep it that way, maybe. Let's be honest, sometimes that is preferable. Sometimes you get too many inputs and you want to send those inputs on back. You know what I'm saying? So, but this is for those times when perhaps you're dealing with a lot. Most people don't know what's going on, but you genuinely, for sure need some help. And maybe in these instances, you're a little bit anxious about feeling like you're a bother to your friends, to your family, to those who love and support you. I know something don't sound right about that, but here we go, because this does happen, again, speaking from experience. But you find yourself and you're like, ooh, I really could use a hand with this. I could really use some help. But I don't really want to bother people. I don't want to be a burden. I know people are busy. They've got their own lives. They've got their own stuff. So what I suggest in these cases is just send a text and send that text to whomever, ask them for that specific favor. And within that same text message at the very end, so maybe perhaps it might say something like, hey, would you mind picking up some dog food? And then at the end of that, I would put, if not, no worries. I've definitely got it handled. And with that, it gives the other person an easy out, because obviously it's like, yeah, they do in fact have their own lives, they have their own stuff going on. So it truly does take the pressure off of them, and it also removes that initial fear that we have sometimes about being a burden. I know that it sounds easy, it sounds simple, sounds all of that, but legitimately, this works, okay? So if you're one of those people, you don't like to ask for help, you don't like to bother people, you don't want to you don't want to, vent or offload or whatever, give people an out. Go on ahead and text whoever, tell them what's going on. Oh, just got a lot going on right now. Don't really want to get into all of the meat and potatoes of all of it, but I could really use some help with getting the dogs to the groomer. Do you think that you can help me out? And if not, 100%, no worries. I've got it handled. I'm telling you right now that this works. And here's what I will say, all right? And this is the truth right here, is that the longer you wait to ask for help, the longer that you continue kind of managing on your own, without asking for help, without asking for support, the heavier the whole house gets. You can only rely on those blankets and dehumidifiers for so long before that load-bearing wall completely gives out. You can't just wipe up the water and try to mop every other day and go out and buy more and more dehumidifiers and ignore all the pressure that's pushing against you. And here's the other thing, okay? We have to stop assuming that people can magically see that we are struggling. Sometimes you just have to tell people, okay? Sometimes you have to. Because frankly, they can't hear what you don't say. If they don't know what they don't know. All right. And it's okay to admit that you're tired. It's okay to admit that the structure is buckling. It's okay to let the people know that you are needing help. It's okay to make the phone call. From the bottom of my heart, y'all, I am begging you all to let the people in your life know that your wall is leaning. All right, hand off the small stuff. Hand off that stuff. Ask for the help so that you can have the energy to deal with the big stuff. We know you're dealing with big stuff. They know you're dealing with big stuff. They want to help. You don't have to hold up the whole house all by yourself. Let them help you. And that's all I've got for you all today. That's it, and that's all, okay? I'll catch y'all in the next one. With that, be here, be you, be now.